Chapter 489. Flame, 10. Bonus images. Demon kings were nearly immortal beings. They weren't completely immortal, but they didn't die easily either. They would survive numerous killings. Moreover, physical attacks hardly affected them. Even Molin, with his brute strength, couldn't directly impact the soul of the demon kings by merely smashing their heads, since they possessed a near-infinite pool of dark power and a similarly powerful soul. To kill, or rather obliterate, a demon king, it required an attack that directly damaged their soul. The most fitting method was to purify them with divine power. Alternatively, it was also possible to cut through the dark power and the soul of demon kings with an even more powerful attack like one from the Moonlight Sword. Though slightly less efficient, it was also possible to damage demon kings with high-level magic that could affect the dark power of the demon kings or cut them down with sword force. It was possible to kill a demon king with any of these methods as long as they were persistently applied. However, unlike humans, it was difficult to discern when a demon king was going to die, even as they neared death. There were still signs that betrayed a demon king's weakening, including a weakening flow of dark power, the shift from aggressive to defensive tactics, emotional overdrive, or conversely, excessive calmness. Such signs were helpful in gauging how close a demon king was to death. Eugene had employed such methods when fighting demon kings 3 centuries ago. But it was different now. His eyes were imbued with divinity, and he could clearly see the end of the demon king, the specter. "I can see it." He thrust the holy sword twice, each strike tearing through space with the force to split it entirely. He wielded the Moonlight Sword layered with 6 stacks of empty sword. Even before that, he had slashed the specter multiple times with both the Moonlight Sword and Holy Sword. Any ordinary demon king would have already perished after taking such attacks. However, the specter could not be called ordinary by any means. In the first place, he wasn't actually even a demon king. The specter had said it himself. He was dying. The end was near. He was an incomplete existence, an imperfect vessel. The destructive dark power of destruction which filled and distorted him was causing him to self-collapse. Eugene had seen this happen multiple times before. Jagan had been a prime example. He was a young beast folk strong enough to earn himself the nickname the Beast of Revesta, and he was seen as a demon who might have even ascended to the Demon King's throne someday. However, Jagan could not withstand the dark power he summoned and self-destructed at the very last moment. Alfiro, the leader of Revesta's vassals, exploded like a mosquito when he was overwhelmed by the surge of dark power without even having a chance to regenerate. The specter was drawing dark power beyond the extreme limit of his existence, beyond the threshold of his existence. Moreover, he had caused his core to rampage with ignition, and he had already recovered from death dozens of times. As a result, his predestined end was arriving much sooner than expected. Eugene could see that with his eyes. He could see the specter's core gradually collapsing due to ignition's frenzy. Even without fighting, the specter wouldn't last the day. Eugene made some rapid calculations. The remaining time is. It wasn't plentiful. No matter how resilient he became or how far his white flame formula evolved, handling greater power only led to a greater backlash of ignition. If the specter had half a day left at most, Eugene only had a few minutes left to fight. "That's enough," Eugene said. He planned to end it while ignition lasted. That was the only choice he had, since he wouldn't be able to fight any longer once ignition ended. What about the Moonlight Sword? Could he wield it again in the remaining few minutes? It was just wishful thinking. He had already expended enough energy for hundreds of attacks in one go. But he didn't necessarily need the Moonlight Sword. Unlike when Vermouth wielded it, Eugene's Holy Sword had the potential to take the head of a demon king. The prolonged contemplation was cut short, and reality came crashing down. The specter was equally resolved to deliver a fatal blow. Despite the acceleration of his core's collapse with each extraction of dark power, the specter didn't care. He would kill. He would win. He would end it. His resolve was once again forged and tempered. Eugene faced the specter while holding the Holy Sword upright. A line of light was drawn in the air. It was a straight slash drawn top to bottom, a straight vertical line. The line of light was thin enough to be called a streak, but it spread instantly and covered everyone's field of vision. But the specter wasn't engulfed by the light. White flames danced in the specter's grasp, and the spreading void countered the light. Swords clashed. There was no sound of metal on metal. Instead, both Eugene and the specter heard the trembling of souls. Light scattered and flames fluttered. Eugene twisted his body to avoid the remnants of the specter's attack. The shattered remains of the attacks were still deadly if he made contact. He had completely severed the support from the saints. He didn't have his ring either. Was there a means for him to instantly heal his wounds? Could be worth trying to consciously use healing magic, but no, Eugene decided. The source of Eugene's divine power was the holy sword Altair. The sword was meant to slash. It was arrogant of him to consider healing himself when he should be fully committed to slashing his opponent to death. If that were the case, I can see it. He could see too clearly. He knew he wouldn't be hit by the debris of the attacks, that they would not touch him and that he would not be swept away. He found himself guiding the holy sword in a swirly path. Light created countless reflections in space like a mirror and erased the numerous fragments of destruction. Eugene took a single step. Though the mind perceived it as such, Eugene traveled a huge distance. Once again, a sound of soul trembling, or rather cracking, resonated. Was it from clashing so many times? Was it from repeatedly using a power too overwhelming for a human to handle? That might be the case, Eugene decided. He could feel that the specter's situation wasn't much different from his own. Just as the specter's core was collapsing from channeling an overwhelming amount of power, Eugene's body was being destroyed by the overwhelming power. Just as Hamel's body was ruined by the side effects of ignition and led to his death, Eugene, too, was gradually tilting towards that end. No, Eugene said firmly. This was different. He denied the sensation. The divinity embedded in his thoughts provided a clear answer. This wasn't a power that was impossible for him to handle. Instead, it was a power that was difficult for him to handle. Even though only a single word was changed, the meaning was completely transformed. Eugene's body would not collapse. He would surpass the extreme. He would cross the line of death. He held on to his crumbling body with his willpower. He was forcibly twisting open a path that didn't exist. He was illuminating the crushing dark power with light. He moved to avoid being devoured by death. He felt an intense heat rising from the bottom of his heart. His body and soul seemed to be burning, but they didn't turn to ash. His body emitted a creaking sound, and there was the sound of his soul shattering. A crack was formed as a result, and it was filled with light. His existence was reforged anew. He heard a sound. He heard a cacophony of sounds, not those of destruction but of a different nature. Voices, an overwhelming chorus of prayers. They were acclamations for the hero, Eugene Lionheart. The call was familiar, not strange in the slightest. He had been familiar with this sound 300 years ago, and he was familiar with it now as well. But the sound infused in this moment bore desire. Thousands were looking up at Eugene in the sky. The continent's renowned knights, warriors, mercenaries, wizards, and priests held Eugene's name close to their hearts. Eugene Lionheart. He was a descendant of the Great Vermouth and a member of the most prestigious family of warriors, the Lionheart family. Rumors about him were bound to proliferate from an early age. He was born into a collateral line of the Lionheart family. He bore the core traits of the Lionheart family: gray hair and golden eyes. However, Eugene's family was far removed from the main branch's authority. It was considered one of the more marginalized, backward branches. Still, he was the first of the collateral lines in the 300 years of Lionheart history to win the bloodline continuation ceremony. It was also the first time a member of the collateral line was adopted into the main family and inherited the white flame formula. Eugene had led a life of breaking norms from a young age, and his story quickly became a topic of interest across the continent. The man who captivated everyone's attention from a young age became the hero. Despite being young, he had already inscribed his name in history, and his name was destined to become a legend or a myth. Even now, the attention was focused on him. Everyone would give his name if asked who was leading, guiding, and ending this war. Thus, everyone held Eugene's name in their hearts. They shouted, cheered, and yearned for the defeat of the Demon King, the end of the war and victory. Go forth. He had heard the same words when he broke the barrier and climbed over the wall. The words were the same and the mission remained unchanged. He moved forward, fulfilled their wishes, and responded to their prayers. He had severed the support of the saints. He could not share the burden of the massive power with anyone else. Eugene remained in a precarious state without means to heal his wounds. Yet he momentarily felt liberated from the overwhelming power. It was only a fleeting moment of freedom, but he didn't miss it. He took a step, or rather stepped far beyond. Eugene's existence moved forward in such a fashion. He wielded the light. Roaring flames blocked the light, which seemed eager to consume everything in sight. However, the dark power failed to completely intercept the light, which advanced forward without being pushed back or scattered. The sound of something breaking followed immediately after. Eugene saw the trajectory of the holy sword. There were fragments fluttering in the air, and they were not of light but actual shards of the blade. As Eugene continued to swing, the holy sword broke apart. However, that was only how it appeared on the surface. Even as the metal blade crumbled, the light did not extinguish. Instead, the light began to burn more intensely. Eugene wasn't confused by the situation. Now wasn't a moment to harbor doubts. He understood the phenomenon. It was simple. There was no longer a need for the sword to be confined within a physical blade. Vermouth was the sole wielder of the holy sword, apart from the founder of Eurus. However, his sword did not shine as it did now, and the blade had never broken. The light diffracted and split into the expansive sky as hundreds of beams. Just a little more. The spectre thought as such. His core was collapsing at an accelerated speed with each further extraction of dark power. He was becoming increasingly aware of his impending demise. But he wasn't ready yet. He wanted to fight a bit more. To be honest, he simply wanted to win. After all, his demise was already predestined and couldn't be altered. The spectre swallowed hard while placing a hand over his chest. He willed his core to surge again, amplifying and intertwining his dark power even further. He focused on combining the white flame formula, Vermouth's spatial magic, and everything else he could muster with his foundation. He based everything on Hamel's technique. It did not belong to him, but it was what the spectre was most familiar with. The two did not avoid each other's attacks. Instead, they confronted each other's swords head-on, if what they wielded now could still be called swords. Eugene wielded light, and the spectre held a white flame. The clash turned into a fierce storm. Both moved forward. They were invisible from below. Those of lesser stature couldn't even perceive the form of their battle, but they could feel it. They were in the presence of the divine. They felt renewed respect for Eugene Lionheart, and that added to their wishes and prayers once again. Ultimately, what Eugene and the spectre sought wasn't much different. Both wanted to kill the Demon King of Destruction and the Demon King of Incarceration. They wanted to save Vermouth and the world. They only differed in the process they pursued toward that outcome. What was clashing was not light and flame but each other's convictions and resolutions. Was the winner right and the loser wrong? To divide them with such binary thinking was the real mistake. Both of them desired the same thing. Proof, Eugene thought. There was no need to pass it to the next era. Eugene would end it in this year. He would kill the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon King of Destruction. To prove that, Eugene wielded the light against the spectre. Could not be done in this era. If Eugene could not defeat him, he had no chance against the Demon King of Incarceration, let alone the Demon King of Destruction. If he was killed by the Demon King of Incarceration and his soul captured, there was no more hope for the world. Therefore, he would pass that possibility to the next era. To prove myself, the spectre thought. Vermouth transformed him into the incarnation of destruction. He was told the truth by the Demon King of Incarceration. The existence known as the spectre didn't exist in any era before, so he needed to prove his reason for existence in the current era. For him, there truly was no next. Just a bit more, the spectre told himself. The spectre had to acknowledge Eugene. He was strong, extremely so. Moreover, he was growing stronger through this battle. The current Eugene Lionheart was stronger than he was only a few minutes ago. Had he been holding back? Impossible. He had been sincere from the start. He had distributed his power evenly throughout the fight. Yet he felt a significant difference between Eugene from earlier and Eugene now. However, it wasn't disheartening. Eugene's growth was, after all, a joyous occasion for the spectre. Just a little more. He seemed reachable. It was possible. The spectre transformed his dark power into flames. He unleashed all of it. Was it fine for him to do it? Could he truly end Eugene Lionheart? Was he allowed to decide the end of this era with his own hands? Did he have such a right? Ridiculous contemplations. He had resolved such trivial doubts long ago. The spectre's resolve remained unchanged. Hence, there was no hesitation in his actions. And because of his desperate desire to reach Eugene Lionheart, he eventually did. The ephemeral flames surpassed the light and engulfed Eugene. At least that was how it looked to the specter. The flames surpassed the light only because the holy sword completely shattered. The light of the holy sword, no longer confined to the blade, gained freedom. It broke free from its shell and enveloped Eugene as a warm light. Despite the flames having the power to annihilate everything, they failed to invade the cradle of light. Eugene momentarily closed his eyes in his cradle of light. Despite his overwhelming emotions, he could understand the light slightly. He then reopened his eyes. He reached for his chest with his right hand. Divine Sword. A soft murmur marked the end. Chapter 490. Flame 11. What was I lacking? The question rang out in the void. In truth, I know the answer. There was too big a gap between our techniques. Even though I modified and evolved them in my own way, they could not be compared to the real deal, the voice continued. He didn't expect a reply. But that wasn't the only thing I was lacking, was it? I believe that I am strong. I am far stronger than the demon kings who perished 300 years ago, he continued. The specter knew this to be a fact. I'm aware that this strength isn't entirely my own, but I don't think that matters. I didn't want to boast or take pride in my strength. I needed power, and you provided as much as was necessary. It almost felt as if the specter was reciting a soliloquy. Honestly, I'm still not sure what you expected of me or what you wanted from me. But since you kept supporting me with your power, that must mean that my choices weren't entirely wrong. With that, the specter fell silent for a moment. He felt a mix of emotions surging from deep inside his heart. They were deep, complex, and sticky. The specter let out a deep sigh as the wave of emotions engulfed him. I failed in the end. The sigh turned into a bitter laugh. I thought I did my best. I thought I could reach him with just a bit more effort. But in the end, I failed. What had he been lacking in? He had been given the dark power of destruction, Vermouth's white flame formula and magic, Hamel's techniques, as well as instincts and intuition befitting the incarnation of destruction. Had he been clumsy in orchestrating all that he had been given? Well, after a moment of thought, the specter slowly shook his head. I can't necessarily say that my failure is the wrong outcome. But he couldn't help but think of the worst outcome. Even if Eugene proved himself today, he could very well lose against the Demon King of Incarceration. If that happened, then this era, this world, everything would be left without a next. The cycle of reincarnation and the special outlier would all cease to exist. The Demon King of Incarceration would never show mercy if there was no longer anyone with whom to keep his promise. The specter's imagination caused him deepening anxiety. Simultaneously, he felt fear rising from his heart. Was I right? What if he had done better? What if he had been stronger, and the Demon King of Incarceration had shown him the truth as one last act of mercy? What if Vermouth had made him the incarnation of destruction with the intention of securing hope for the next era? No. The specter swallowed hard and vigorously shook his head. He didn't want to entertain such weak thoughts. He had used everything at his disposal. He had given his best. He had used everything he had to kill Eugene. He had simply failed to reach Eugene in the end. Eugene was strong. The fool had managed to defeat the specter without the support of the saints or Sienna's help. Is it inevitable that a fake can never beat the real thing? The specter whispered under his breath. It has nothing to do with being real or fake, someone responded. The specter was startled and raised his head in the empty realm. In front of him he saw Vermouth bound to a chair with chains. However, his head was no longer bowed like before. Even though Vermouth's face looked worn and haggard, there was a clear twinkle in his eyes. "You are simply you," said Vermouth. His voice was hoarse and rather unpleasant to the ears. It was vastly different from the voice the specter held in his memories. Yet, changed as he might be, he was still unmistakably Vermouth Lionheart. "It was I who acted however I wanted," continued Vermouth. The specter couldn't find words to respond and simply stared at Vermouth. He had so much he wanted to say, but he could not decide where to start. "Hamel, Sienna, Anise, Molen, and even you. I imposed on your understanding without explaining anything. I acted solely on my own will," said Vermouth. His voice was slowly fading away, forcing the specter to close his mouth reluctantly. Vermouth wasn't in a state to converse. Speaking this much was already an extreme effort for him. I don't think it was wrong to give you power. Face was yours to make. Whatever you did, I have no right to say it was wrong, explained Vermouth. The spectre shuddered at his words. He had given up on making an effort to speak with Vermouth because he didn't want to burden Vermouth any further. However, Vermouth's words were the answer to the questions that had been tormenting the spectre. I feel guilt toward you, Vermouth said. I feel like I've dragged you into this mess. Like I've forced you into a position to make a choice you never wanted. Vermouth's eyes had held hostility during their first encounter. It was most likely that Vermouth simply could not accept the spectre's existence at the time. The spectre was a death knight born from the corpse of his dear companion, and he had falsely believed himself to be Hamel. However, Vermouth's view changed over time. The hostility he felt towards the spectre was replaced by pity, and now the spectre could finally understand why Vermouth had harbored such feelings toward him. I acknowledge your existence, said Vermouth. He gave a bitter smile and blood trickled from his cracked lips. The spectre stood still and silent as he watched Vermouth. If possible, he wanted to approach Vermouth and converse with him. He wanted to ask what had happened, why he had ended up in such a state, and how he could help him. But that was an impossible task. The spectre could feel it. It would be impossible for him to even approach Vermouth. Any attempt at conversation wouldn't yield the answers the spectre desired. Just being able to face Vermouth like this was in itself a miracle. Vermouth continued, and I'm sorry. I've been too. It's okay, you bastard, the spectre interrupted. He shook his head with a soft chuckle. You shouldn't feel guilty. I did what I wanted. It was my choice. His voice trembled slightly. Still, thank you for saying that, said the spectre. He composed his emotions before continuing, thank you for giving me strength. He stared directly at Vermouth's face. Thank you for giving me a chance. He could feel Vermouth's presence growing fainter. The sound of clanking chains reached his ears, followed by a noise resembling distant waves. Just hold on a little longer, the spectre assured. Their time together was running short. Your comrades, he started. The spectre wondered if it was his place to say such things. After everything so far, why not? He smiled while entertaining such a thought. Your friends will come to save you, he corrected himself. Vermouth's lips parted slightly. It looked like he wanted to speak, but no sound came from his mouth. Vermouth gave a sad smile. The chains tightened around him with a creaking noise. Vermouth's figure grew fainter as the world seemed to collapse around them. The spectre felt grateful for this moment of miracle. He slowly raised his hand to his chest and said, That's right. He had been defeated, but he hadn't failed. The spectre decided to see it that way. He had given everything he had. He had tested the hero Eugene with all his might and lost. However, this defeat was not a failure. The spectre may have lost, but Eugene had won. He might make a loser's lament, but he should not curse the future with anxiety and fear. There was one thing left for the spectre to do, and that was to trust in Eugene. He had to trust in his comrades. He had to trust in the world that followed Eugene. Ha! The spectre gave a curt laugh before turning away. He had been granted a reunion by a miracle. Although he had not exchanged as many words as he had wanted with Vermouth in the end, it did not matter. He had already heard what he most wanted to hear. So now it was time. Let's go. It was time for him to face the end. Qua. The third swing of the divine sword, despite being the last, emitted a more intense light than before. The attack was fueled by the prayers and wishes of the battlefield. As everyone chanted Eugene's name and held him dear in their hearts, his divine power was amplified. The spectre thought he had reached, but his flames never touched Eugene. The light emitted by the shattered holy sword denied the flames' intrusion. The divine sword Eugene drew from his chest cut through everything. The flames, the magic, and even the spectre's existence. The spectre calmly accepted his fate. His eyes fluttered open. The first thing he saw was a clear expanse of the sky above. It was a sky purged of malice and magic. His gaze lingered on the heavens for a moment and he gave a soft chuckle. Miracle, he whispered once again. When had the tapestry of miracles begun to weave itself? At the drawing of the divine sword? When the sword cleaved through the flames? Or was it when it severed the essence of the spectre himself? The specifics eluded his grasp. The moments had been fleeting. Yet the miracle lingered, sweet and extended. The specter inhaled deeply before lowering his gaze to his chest. The gaze remained there. To his surprise, his body was whole. It wasn't mutilated nor cleaved as he had expected. However, that was only how it appeared on the surface. The essence of the specter had been sliced beyond revival. His core had been nearly obliterated. The specter stood on the brink of dissolution, even if it hadn't been for the final strike from the divine sword. "This, then, is my testament," the specter murmured with a faint smile. Eugene stood near the specter. The weight of exhaustion pressed upon him, and it proved challenging for him to even remain upright. He longed to fall to the ground or simply collapse. However, it wasn't yet time for him to fall unconscious. "Testament." Eugene's terse voice cut through. The battlefield was slowly settling. Surprisingly, the Nur had ceased their advance once the divine sword tore through the specter. The bodies of the monsters began to disintegrate once what remained of the specter touched the earth, once the sustenance of his dark power dissipated. As such, the battlefield no longer demanded Eugene's vigilance. Now his duty was to see this moment through to the final curtain, to witness the specter's end. "It's a testament for you," the specter said, his gaze locking with Eugene's. There was a smile gracing his visage. "I exerted every ounce of my strength in an attempt to kill you, yet here you stand. I am defeated and you remain victorious." His defeat was a testament to Eugene Lionheart's might. It was evidence that Eugene Lionheart was stronger than the specter, and his victory was untainted by cowardice. It was unassailable. "Remarkable," the specter lauded. "You are strong. You possess strength that's incomparable to mine. And you will only continue to grow stronger." "Of course," Eugene responded as if it were the most natural fact. "A moment ago," the specter began, his voice trailing as the weight of his impending dissolution became palpable. "I encountered Vermouth." "Is that so?" Eugene's response was devoid of surprise. His intuition had already whispered to him of the specter's encounter. As the divine sword cleaved the specter's essence, a fragment of his existence had drifted somewhere beyond Eugene's reach, yet not beyond his understanding. It wasn't difficult for Eugene to deduce the destination of the drift and what his essence had been tethered to. "What did that bastard have to say?" Eugene inquired, a hint of curiosity beneath the veneer of indifference. "He acknowledged me," the specter relayed, the edges of his words tinged with a complex blend of emotions. "Well, that's good for you," Eugene remarked, allowing a soft chuckle to escape him as he comfortably settled beside the specter. "Did he not say anything else?" he prodded further. "He expressed his regret to me. He apologized," the specter shared. "As he should have, that bastard," Eugene muttered, his voice laced with a blend of jest and bitterness. "But he didn't apologize to me, did he?" "No, that he did not," the specter confirmed. "Damn bastard," Eugene sighed while shaking his head. "I told him that you will come to rescue him," said the specter. "Right," responded Eugene. "Other than that, we didn't have any conversations that you might find interesting or necessary." "It's the same for me, but Vermouth also didn't have much time," the specter explained. Eugene did not respond to his words but instead glanced at the specter's face. "I can't summon Molan, but if you wish I can call Sienna and Anise," he suggested. "Bastard. What am I supposed to talk about with those two?" The specter chuckled. His feelings for Sienna, Anise, and Molan ultimately stemmed from Hamel's memories. Mixed in with his feelings for them was a sense of longing. "I don't need that kind of consideration. Like how it is now." He was being sincere. Eugene licked his lips, then asked, "Any regrets?" "Regrets? I decided not to have any," the specter responded with a grimace. "Feeling regretful and thinking that I have failed. Regretting his defeat. Regretting his failure." After a pause, the specter continued, "It's meaningless to have any regrets right now. So, stop with the bullshit," Eugene interjected. With a scoff, he gently punched the specter's shoulder. "How can a dying man not have any regrets? Forcing yourself to think otherwise doesn't mean your regrets are going to disappear magically. If you feel any regrets, just leave them here," Eugene suggested. He raised his hand from the specter's shoulder and rested it on top of the specter's hand, which lay on his chest. "I'll take them with me," declared Eugene. The specter managed to turn his head towards Eugene. He was met with shining golden eyes. There was not even a hint of mockery present in those eyes. They only contained firm conviction, belief, and determination. Haha. He thought he wouldn't leave any regrets behind. He tried to consciously ignore them. But in the end, Eugene's words were true. Even if one thought they were meeting a satisfying end, everyone still had regrets at the time of their death. All right. The specter squeezed his chest with his fingers before continuing, "You take them." He had lost. He wanted to win, but he lost. He had thought victory to be within his reach, but he fell short. What would become of the world now? Could the hero, Eugene Lionheart, defeat the Demon King of Incarceration? Could he defeat the Demon King of Destruction? Could he save Vermouth? What would happen to Anise, Sienna, and Molen? He decided to entrust all of his regrets and worries to Eugene. That was his wish. Eugene slowly nodded. The specter's smile faded when he saw this. Slowly, the specter's body began to crumble into ash. He watched his own body disintegrate with a smiling face. It felt more comforting leaving and entrusting his regrets rather than insisting he had none. "If it's you, it's possible," said the specter. "Of course I can," Eugene answered with a smile, and the specter smiled back. "All right." His hand and the rest of his upper body turned to ash. For the last time, the specter turned his head up to look at Eugene. "Because you're Eugene Lionheart." He was the reincarnation of the god of war. He was the reincarnation of Hamel. He was the hero. Such words were left unspoken. Just as the specter was simply himself, Eugene too was simply himself. "I'm not tired." Did his memory as Hamel end with an onslaught of sleep? It was hard to say. After all, the end he met in his memories had been fabricated. In any case, he didn't feel sleepy now. But slowly and quietly he could feel his consciousness fading. "Go," the specter murmured. "All right." Eugene clenched the ashes remaining in his hand. "Let's go," the hero responded. Chapter 491. Flame 12. Bonus image. The specter left behind nothing but a handful of ash as he vanished. Eugene stood still for a moment while staring at the pile of gray remaining in his palm. It was Eugene who had told the specter not to dismiss his regrets. He had offered to carry them together. The specter had not refused. Instead of forcibly trying to shake off his regrets, the specter just left them as a lingering burden for Eugene to worry about, just as he suggested. What those regrets were about. "It feels strange," Eugene said. He hadn't heard the specter's regrets individually, as the specter had not been given enough time to talk about all of his lingering attachments. But strangely enough, Eugene felt like he knew what the specter's last regrets were about. The world, relationships, the future, and Eugene himself. Surely it must be regarding such things. Eugene slowly clenched the ash in his palm. Could this be called the specter's remains? Eugene gave a bitter smile. He no longer thought of the specter as a fake. Did that mean he understood what the specter truly was? No, he was far from complete understanding, but they had exchanged words. Had he been an enemy? Eugene turned to look behind him. Almost nothing was left of the city. This vast land had simply become a ruin, a place that used to be a city. The Nur had all perished. The same was true for the people as well. Those who perished included the citizens who failed to escape Horia during the invasion, soldiers and warriors turned into monsters by the specter's power, and dark wizards who couldn't technically be counted as humans. All had been destroyed. The Liberation Army also had its share of loss. Eugene was not naive enough to think that his allies would be unscathed. Injuries were commonplace even in children's war games. It would be absurd to think that a real war against demons and monsters could be waged without a single drop of bloodshed. However, their loss was minimal even in the most conservative estimate. The Allies' losses were minor, considering the scale of the battlefield and the sheer number of enemies they had defeated. Naturally, that didn't mean that the deaths of allies could be taken lightly. They had suffered over 100 casualties. Their loss had been minimized with Sienna's constant watch over all the allies and the priest's real-time wound healing. If Sienna had not been watching over the battlefield or the priest had not coordinated well, their losses would have been much greater. "He was an enemy," Eugene muttered. He stared at his clenched fist. The specter had waged war. Even if the war had been waged for Eugene's benefit, the fact that the specter had waged war remained unchanged. The specter had made efforts to reduce civilian casualties by evacuating them under the guise of expulsion, but even so, this was still a war. Allies suffered damage even if it could be considered minor. Some were killed and others were injured by the black wizards, undead, demonic beasts, demons and the Nur. The specter was an enemy. But he wasn't a demon king, Eugene murmured softly. That was the conclusion he arrived at. The specter had been an enemy, yes, but not a demon king. They exchanged words and attempted to come to a mutual understanding. Although their methods differed, their pursuits were ultimately the same. That was why he decided to take on the burden of the specter's regrets. Eugene slowly clenched his chest. Crack! The small spark of divine power that remained in him wrapped around his hand. It was an insubstantial amount, not enough to even form a small dagger. However, that did not matter. Eugene had not summoned divine power to wield a sword. He silently stared at the crimson power entwining his hand for a moment. The divine power resembled a form of flame different from that summoned by the white flame formula. He brought his other hand close to the divine flame, then unclenched his fingers. He allowed the black ash to scatter into the flames. Is this a funeral? Anis's voice resonated. The connection he had with the saints had been re-established. He had been expecting a torrent of curses or at least an icy voice to greet him. However, he was surprised to hear that Anis's tone was calm and composed. Aren't you angry? Eugene asked. I cannot prioritize my feelings in the current situation. Of course I'm angry. I will take it out on your buttocks later, Hamel, responded Anis. That sounds terrifying. Eugene muttered. Please answer my question. Are you holding a funeral right now? Is it a ritual with special meaning? Asked Anis. It used to be done this way in the past, Eugene muttered with a slight nod. The remains, the ashes, were burnt with divine power. It adds something more to it. And what are you adding? Questioned Anis. Regrets, beliefs, pride, things like that. Well, it's not like anything really gets added. It's just a customary ritual, answered Eugene. The specter's ashes danced within the divine flame before eventually disappearing. Eugene watched the scene play out with a wry smile. Do you dislike such rituals? Things like sorcery? Asked Eugene. I did when I was younger. To be precise, I was taught to dislike it. I was told that such funeral rites were considered heresy. But that's not true anymore, answered Anis. It was hard for Anis to figure out what feelings she should harbor toward the specter. Yet one thing was clear. Anis respected the specter's choice, though that didn't necessarily mean she agreed with him. But she felt compassion for him. The specter had been, after all, alone. I don't know if he will be allowed to ascend to heaven. Nevertheless, I will pray that he may be led to heaven after paying his dues, as a lost lamb who has endured a troubled life, stated Anis. So he can't be led to heaven just like that, questioned Eugene. No matter the reason, he has sinned. Naturally, he must pay for the sins he has committed. Anis spoke decisively. Whether the light would truly demand retribution remained questionable, but Anis didn't voice this thought. And Hamel, you must pay for your sins too, Anis added. Sister. Sir Eugene won't be able to move due to the burden of ignition, responded Christina. Oh my Christina, that's true. Then we must go ourselves, Anis chimed. Yes, a truly unavoidable circumstance, Christina responded. Hamel, you heard us, right? We'll be coming soon, so don't worry too much. Since you will likely struggle to stand, just lay there and bare your behind, Anis told him. Sister? Bear his behind? What kind of unspeakable words are you uttering? Christina questioned. Don't pretend to be innocent if you're secretly looking forward to it, Christina. Don't you also want to smack that annoying Hamel's behind? Eugene's shoulders shook silently as the two saints conversed. It didn't feel like a joke at all. Despite trying to appear calm, Anis was incredibly angry. Christina likely felt the same. Eugene didn't doubt for a moment that Anis genuinely intended to spank him. I have to run, Eugene thought desperately. It was impossible. As Anis said, Eugene no longer had any control over his body after using ignition. Eugene hastily raised his cloak. Mare, take me and run, he ordered. No response came. Mare had been unconscious for a while now. Though she hadn't borne the burden of assisting Eugene in battle, she had failed to endure the repeated shockwaves of battle. Her pale face had become even paler as a result. Eugene barely managed to raise his head to look at the sky. He could see Rhaenyra approaching him with the saints on her back. It wasn't just Rhaenyra either. Sienna was coming towards him as well. Eugene was aghast. No, the entire army was moving towards Eugene. Hundreds of cavalries and thousands of infantries were all drawing near to share the joy of victory. Eugene gulped involuntarily. It was the natural course of action to share in the joy of victory. There should be announcements of victory and celebrations. But now wasn't the time. How could he bear to be scolded and spanked by Anise and Christina in front of everyone right after ending the war with the dignity of the hero and the god of war? All the reverence and faith he built up would go down the drain in an instant. As much wrong as I did. Being spanked is a bit, Eugene protested hastily, then stopped himself. He shivered as he felt a chill run down his back. The sky was still clear, but something twinkled at the edge of the high sky. In an instant the sky warped. A beam of light pierced through the clouds, creating a hole in the sky. That bastard, Eugene cursed. It was impossible for Eugene to react. Yet there were many who wanted to protect him. The saints immediately performed miracles, and a dazzling light enveloped Eugene. The broken blade of the holy sword also responded to the light of the saints. Raymiria chanted a draconic spell. Sienna unleashed several grand spells. Melkith screamed as she hurled herself forward. Lovelian's pantheon moved as a whole to shield Eugene. Ivatar threw his axe. Alcester swung the empty sword. Carmen leaped from atop a wyvern. Seal spat blood as she glared with her demon eye. Raphael soared with Apollo. Gilead rushed forward while throwing aside the Lionheart flag. Sion gasped while shouting Eugene's name. Amon, Ordis, Ivik and the Tower Masters acted as well. However, their actions were meaningless. The demonic sword glory was a weapon bestowed by the Demon King of Incarceration himself. Moreover, Gavid Lindman possessed the demon eye of divine glory, which was fit to be called the most powerful demon eye in existence. As he fully wielded his power, Gavid Lindman fully deserved his title as the Blade of Incarceration. Raymiria's draconic spell was utterly negated. Sienna's magic was cut at its very source. Melkith's Omega Force was shattered. Lovelian's pantheon was split in two. Ivatar's axe was broken. Alcester's empty sword exploded in mid-air. Carmen was swept away by the wind accompanying Gavid's strike. Seal's demon eye couldn't hold the enemy. Raphael and Apollo fell together. The shockwave from the strike blew away Gilead and Sion. Gavid cut through everyone's will to save Eugene. The last thing remaining was the light enveloping Eugene. As Gavid plummeted, he pierced through the light with his gaze. He saw Eugene's face at the center of the brilliance. Was Eugene terrified? Did he sense his impending death? Was he enraged? In that fleeting moment, Gavid imagined a plethora of emotions on Eugene's face. But he was wrong on all counts. Contrary to the twisted visage he expected, Eugene was smirking. There was a sneer on his face and a corner of his lips was curled upwards. Gavies was speechless. He had been contemplating throughout Eugene's battle with the spectre and had forcibly arrived at a conclusion. This action was not befitting of a demon, nor did it align with his honorable title as the Blade of Incarceration. Yet it was the correct course of action for him to take as a Duke of Helmuth. While watching the battle, he had intuitively come to an understanding that Hamel of Extermination, Eugene Lionheart, the hero, had grown far too powerful. He had continued to grow stronger even during his battle with the spectre. His sword had been sharp enough to reach the demon kings of the past, and now he seemed capable of easily slicing through the hem of the Demon King of Incarceration's robe. If this was to be the end, there was no need for him to take such drastic actions. But Gavid instinctively knew this was not the end for Eugene Lionheart. His sword would become even sharper, especially the crimson blade that had cut through the spectre. It would potentially become more lethal than even the Holy Sword or the Moonlight Sword. His crimson sword embodied possibilities that could rightfully be called infinite. Gavid had glimpsed the potential within Eugene's crimson sword with the demon eye of divine glory. What Eugene possessed was divine might, an essence of faith that he could not dare to overlook. Therefore he needed to eliminate Eugene. Now was the perfect opportunity to definitively kill the enemy of Helmuth. Eugene was exhausted and off guard. Now was the moment to kill him without fail. It was impossible for Eugene to evade the attack. Others would surely try to protect him, but with the demon eye of divine glory he could bypass all obstructions and slay Eugene in a single strike. Gavid knew he would only make a fool of himself in carrying out his plan. But he still decided to discard the fighting spirit of a demon, the pride he had as the blade of incarceration, and also his personal ambitions. He had decided to make a choice befitting the Duke of Helmuth. But seeing Eugene's smirk made it impossible for him to continue. Gavid relaxed his grip while mocking himself. Whoosh! The dark brilliance emanating from Glory disappeared abruptly. Gavid neither cleaved through the light surrounding Eugene nor struck him. He simply stopped in place and glared at Eugene. "Why did you stop?" Eugene asked, still smirking. "Weren't you going to kill me because you were afraid of me?" "That's right," Gavid responded in a tone devoid of emotions. He did not deny Eugene's claim. "But seeing your smirk made me think if I kill you now, I'll regret it for the rest of my life. And I'll be left with lingering regrets." "Regrets?" Eugene questioned. "It would be just like 300 years ago," answered Gavid. Gavid had failed to kill Hamel in Siena 3 centuries ago. He had made the decision to retreat after being overwhelmed by Hamel's murderous intent and spirit. Since then, Gavid had long regretted not seeing the battle through to the end. The humiliation of that moment, the instance of fear he felt as well as his unresolved emotions, became an everlasting regret with Hamel's death. They had been left forever unaddressed. If he were to kill Eugene now, he would be burdened with a lifetime of regret and lingering thoughts. The humiliation and fear he had in his heart would fester even more. "And," Gavid said with a bitter smile as he sheathed Glory, "even if I hadn't changed my mind about killing you and had swung my sword, I doubt I could have truly killed you." He had been absolutely certain of killing Eugene until the moment he stopped himself. But now, having sheathed Glory, he sensed something else. Gavid let out a scoff as he turned his head to look behind. There stood Noir Giabella, the queen of the night demons. He was standing right behind Gavid. Noir's face seemed shrouded in deeper shadows, perhaps because she stood with her back to the sun. It was difficult to discern her expression. No, to be more precise, Noir's face was expressionless at the moment. Even her usually beautifully shining purple eyes were now dull and subdued. She was simmering with an immense murderous intent. It wasn't anything new for her to express murderous intent, but her current state felt foreign. It was as if Gavid was facing the murderous intent of an entirely different creature. At the same time, Gavid felt a strong sense of caution towards Noir. Despite using the demon eye of divine glory, he hadn't sensed Noir approaching him from behind. If Gavid had proceeded with his initial plan to kill Eugene, Noir would have intervened without hesitation. Could he have anticipated that? Could he have eliminated Noir's interference and still killed Eugene? Was it to this extent? Gavid asked while staring at Noir. It was an ambiguous question. Gavid had not expected Noir to be this powerful. He recognized her strength, but he never thought she would be capable of matching the power of the demon eye of divine glory. And he hadn't expected Noir to care so much about Eugene, about Hamel. He knew of her obsession with him, but the murderous intent she showed now was genuine. Noir was truly prepared to kill Gavid for Eugene's sake. She did not respond to his question. Noir's dull eyes shifted. She looked over Gavid's shoulder at Eugene. She saw Eugene's figure wrapped in light. Noir unconsciously clenched her fist. The ring on her ring finger and the name engraved inside it. She felt the ring that bore Hamel Dynas's name. Chapter 492, Flame 13. Noir Giabella reminisced. The first time she laid eyes on him was during the war era of 300 years ago. Noir had already been crowned the queen of the night demons long before the war erupted. It was a title she maintained even throughout the tumult of war. In fact, she solidified her position even further. Through countless events during the era of war, the name of the queen of the night demons became synonymous with horrific nightmares among humans. Night demons weren't particularly powerful as a race. They possessed only a few skills. While high-ranking night demons might have boasted a variety of talents, the majority of night demons only possessed a single skill, the ability to delve into dreams. Furthermore, lower-ranking night demons couldn't even lead their prey to sleep at will. As such, they resorted to using alcohol, drugs, or even their bodies to extract life force from their targets. But the queen, Noir Giabella, was different. She became a symbol of fear and a living nightmare. Despite being from the relatively unimpressive race of night demons, she amassed power rivaling that of the demon kings. No one could overlook Noir. Her ascension had elevated the status of the night demons as a race. Those times had been exhilarating and fulfilling. She reveled freely, indulging in both demonic instincts and the unique desires of a night demon. She toyed with hundreds, thousands, millions of dreams and crushed human lives as if they were mere weeds or insects. Weeds? Insects? This wasn't just a metaphor. For Noir, it was a reality. Most humans didn't live past 100 years, and lifespans were even shorter during wartime. Even those who lived longer only lasted a few extra decades. To Noir, who had lived hundreds of times longer than ordinary humans, humans were a frail, insignificant race filled with flaws. However, they weren't completely devoid of merits. Noir was fully aware of humans' necessity. While it was still possible to extract life force from demons or other races, humans made excellent prey. They were numerous, perpetually in mating season, hence high in reproduction rate, intelligent enough for conversation, quick to learn when taught, allowing for a variety of dreams to be crafted, and even rapidly recovered their life force. Such was her awareness of humans. She never entertained the thought. The only merits she considered were those of prey. She didn't despise humans. On the contrary, she found them appealing. At most, she considered them cute. Such were the creatures known as humans. They were trivial. How could they possibly wage war against demons? Still, exceptional humans did exist. As humans weren't restricted by mating seasons, allowing for constant reproduction, their sheer numbers occasionally allowed them to produce exceptional individuals deviating from the norm of their race. 300 years ago, 5 such exceptional humans existed. There was the first hero since the founder of Uras to wield the holy sword Altair, Vermouth Lionheart. The future chief of the Buyur tribe, known among the northern barbarians for their belligerence, Molan Roar. The most distinguished among all the chosen saints of light, Anise Slywood. An arch-wizard raised alongside the elves of the Great Forest, despite being human, Sienna Meridian. A mercenary notorious on the battlefield for both fame and infamy, Hameldinas. At first they bore no grand titles. But after the 5th-ranked Demon King, the Demon King of Carnage, fell by their hands, each of their names was suffixed with terrifying and grandiose adjectives. Vermouth of Despair, Molan of Terror, Anise of Hell, Sienna of Calamity, Hamel of Extermination. Naturally, Noir heard of them and their exploits. Her interest was piqued, especially since she was among the demons who had a fondness for humans. She even considered allocating a vast tract of land for humans in her eventual Grand Dominion once the war ended. She wished to see them immediately. Special humans, after all, had a taste just as exceptional. But the opportunity was not forthcoming. The war was in full swing, Helmuth was vast, and the battlefields chosen by Noir did not intersect with the paths of these heroes. Yet bit by bit their paths did overlap. Given that the war stretched over a decade, it was inevitable. The Demon King of Carnage, the Demon King of Cruelty, and the Demon Kind of Fury fell over time. Only 2 Demon Kings remained in the vast Helmuth, and since the Demon King of Destruction wandered the land without establishing a domain, only the Demon King of Incarceration and his dominion had remained standing. The lands of the fallen Demon Kings were conquered by humans, and it caused the territories of the demons to recede. But the war had not ended. A great army loyal to the Demon King of Incarceration remained robust and standing, and the lands behind the domain of Pandemonium were not yet trodden by human feet. All ambitions had converged towards Pandemonium. Many humans who survived the battles in Helmuth headed towards Pandemonium. Even boys from the continent who were mere children at the war's onset, now took up arms as young men and marched towards Pandemonium. Noir too shifted her battlefield. She made no pact with the Demon King of Incarceration. Such contracts, she thought, were but shackles. They bound one to serve under a Demon King for a lifetime, a prospect she did not desire. Though she made no pact, she struck a deal. She was allowed to reign over a certain area of Pandemonium. She was granted the right to hunt in exchange for her service under the Demon King of Incarceration. Furthermore, she was promised a title once the war ended in return for her contributions. But she harbored no greater ambition. She had amassed significant power during the prolonged war, enough to perhaps challenge the throne of a Demon King. Could she overthrow the Demon King of Incarceration? She had briefly entertained the thought before laughing it off. "I don't even want such a thing in the first place," Noir declared. What was greed really? Noir pondered. It was to desire something. But understanding greed was difficult for her. She had obtained everything she ever wanted without effort. Simply wanting something was enough for her to possess it. Even if what she obtained was just an illusion, the illusions she crafted were indistinguishable from reality. What did she desire? The throne of a demon king? The position of the great demon king? The lands of the demon king of incarceration? She recognized their significance but felt no greed for them. What more Giabella desired was. What is it? She asked herself as her desires and aspirations remained an enigma even to herself. But when she first saw him, she came to understand things she hadn't been able to grasp before with startling clarity. Hamel Dinah's. Hamel of extermination. His special. The unique feeling she felt for him was something Noor had not expected. After all, who was the most special out of the 5, the hero or his companions? If 100 people were asked this question, everyone would give the same answer. The most special among the 5 was the hero Vermouth Lionheart. But not to Noir. Of course, Vermouth was special. Molin, Sienna, Anise, they were all special. But not as much as Hamel. The uniqueness of the other 4 did not impress Noir as much as Hamel's did. The memory was still vivid in Noir's mind. When she first ambushed them, Noir was confident in her power but did not underestimate her enemies. After all, they were heroes who represented the human race. Moreover, they had already defeated 3 demon kings. In the first place, as a race, night demons did not specialize in direct confrontation. As such, Noor decided to fight them in a manner befitting a night demon. She delved into the dreams of the 5. She was greeted with intense emotions. There was a depth so profound that its bottom was unknown, a relentless pounding that seemed endless. There was a thick scent of blood. Metal clashed against metal in a deadly dance, slicing through flesh and bone and delving into innards, accompanied by the final throes, groans, screams, and a mix of emotions, evidencing one's life by killing others, unbearable heat, ecstasy, and delirium. Then there was the will to kill. It was a simple, unmatched will to kill. It was an emotion so intense and vast that its depth was unfathomable. Noor had never felt such intense feelings in any human before. He could never forget the chill of that moment. Never before had she imagined her own death, but in that instant Noor grasped the meaning of death for the first time. Despite experiencing it once, Noor could not recreate the chill of that moment or the eventual death it signified. Hamel was special. He allowed Noor to become aware of desires and cravings she had never consciously acknowledged. He drew her gaze because he was special. He became obsessed. She longed for him to etch into her something she had never known. She hoped that just as she found him special, he too would find her special. He wished for it. She wished that they would regard each other as someone special and that they would each long for something. Do we really need to do this? Why would you say that now? Even if it's not this, maybe there's something else, something different we could have. Do you regret it? What about you? I am regretting it. Perhaps, you've penetrated into me too deeply. You feel the same, don't you? If he shed tears of regret and resentment, she would wipe the corners of his eyes and cheeks with blood-stained hands. She would say something cliched like, "I will never forget you in my lifetime." If she were to die by his hand, that too would be ecstatic and joyful. If she were to kill him, she could live the rest of her life cherishing him as a memory while harboring a sense of loss. Either way was fine. Both would be special experiences that life would not offer again. That desire and craving belonged to Noor Giabella, the queen of the night demons. God. She was a Duke of Helmuth, the ruler of Dreamia and Giabella City. Emotions, desires, cravings, all of it naturally belonged to Noor Giabella. It had never been otherwise. Yet now it was becoming not so. Her subjectivity was wavering. Something else was mixing in. My lord. She ruled a nation, invaded neighboring countries, and offered everything she had seized as a sacrifice to challenge the throne of a malevolent deity. You have taken everything from me in the past. I was on the brink of becoming a myth, but I was brought to ruin by you. She was the god of war's saintess. My lord. I hated you. I longed for revenge. You took my hatred and desire for vengeance as mere entertainment. You looked forward to the day I would take my revenge on you. In a time past, she was known as the Twilight Witch. Now everything feels futile. This wasn't the life of Noor Giabella but that of the war god's saintess, the Twilight Witch. She remembered its end, even though she didn't want to remember a life that wasn't hers. They were memories she didn't want to recall. But the memories surfaced on their own and threw her mind into disarray. Despite repeatedly interrupting her thoughts by digging her fingers into her brain, every time the severed thoughts connected, she was greeted with unwanted memories and accompanying emotions. The battlefield. She saw a vast battlefield littered with the corpses of monsters and humans. Destruction approached her. She saw the crimson divine power. I am ashamed to show you my disfigured face. She had caressed her lips with her fingers. Her face was torn to shreds, she didn't want to show it. She always wanted to show him only her seductive and beautiful side. With her only remaining eye barely functioning, she couldn't see his face clearly. Even as the end approached, she couldn't properly see his face. She couldn't live her last moments beautifully. You're just as beautiful as ever. You told me you said I was beautiful. Just like always. My lord. I planned to betray you. Someday, definitely someday. I could have done it at any time. I became your saintess to bring about your eventual fall. I would become a saintess who betrays her God and offers the faithful as sacrifices. Such acts have their own significance. Now at our end I refuse your will. I will not flee. My God, I will not witness your death before mine. I couldn't betray you. I didn't want to become your enemy. You took me in as entertainment, expecting that I would betray you someday. I couldn't meet those expectations. Just as your feelings for me changed, I too changed. If you have a last wish, I will grant it. You were merciful and kind to the very end. But I want a kiss. I didn't want this to be my last wish. Someday, when your war had ended beautifully, if I hadn't been able to betray you, if I couldn't betray you, if I was still by your side as your saint, not as the Twilight Witch but as the saintess of the God of War, I wanted to ask you for you to be my end, not in death but in another sense. In a peaceful world, in a world without war. Not as the Twilight Witch, nor as the saint of the war god. Grant me death. But as your companion. Morgiabella unclenched her fist. Congratulations. With a distorted smile, Nor clutched the ring around her neck. It was the ring she had wanted to place on Hamel's finger someday, the ring engraved with Morgiabella's name. On your victory. She felt the urge to destroy the ring. Eugene Lionheart, she whispered his name.